Okay, so today I want to talk about social technologies and philosophers. I was having a really good conversation with a friend of mine, really in the comment section of my last video, and he was just talking about the idea that he's never thought of this. And I believe it's because we've been focusing so much on the seen in our lives that we do not realize the unseen, because these things that are unseen almost seem structural to us. These are things like property, law, bureaucracy, kings, leadership, all these things, right? But these things all came from somewhere, right? And these things are all social technologies. They're unseen interactions that guide the way that we live. And basically, my idea is that philosophers are social technologists, right? Technologists work on computers, chips, software, everything that we love that we see in our day-to-day lives, even this watch, right? Like technologist. Social technologist, one second. So the entire concept is that these technologists are designing basically material gains that we can exploit in our lives, and exploit is neutral, not in a good or bad way. And my idea is that we have gotten so many gains from the different eras of humanity that every time we had a gain, we needed a social gain to stand on top of it, right? The main example I'm going to be talking about today is agricultural, right? So the agricultural gain, my bad, the agricultural revolution thousands of years ago, it depends on what civilization we're talking about. It could be 5,000 BC, it could be 10,000 BC, whatever. The agricultural revolution changed everything for humanity. We went from hunter-gatherers walking around hunting in packs to staying in one place and being like, all right, let's get all this food out of the ground. But because of that simple change, you had to add new layers to make this new society work, right? Like whose land belongs to who, right? Do you get the crop from this land or do I get to? What if I plant my seeds in the same place as this guy plants it, right? And what if I take the stuff from this guy, right? That he worked hard to plant, right? It's much different than if we hunt this thing together and then we split it all down the middle, right? And then whatever happens with that. And then what happens if we stay in one place? Now we have to defend this place, right? And out of the agricultural revolution came things like property, came law, came bureaucracy that had to manage these complex systems. Like even if you look at ancient Mesopotamia, uh, their canal system that they used to irrigate all the farms in that area is hyper complex, like very complex, especially for that back then, that they needed a bureaucracy to be able to manage and maintain these canals. And it was actually once they were destroyed, their civilization fell, right? Fell into disarray, that is. It's not, I don't think it was an exact moment. I think it was a decline over time. Anyways, because of this civilizational gain, you had to add an entirely new social technologies on top of it. And these were not straightforward, right? This happened over hundreds of years. They had to figure out things to be able to maximize the agricultural revolution, right? So you have thinkers like, you know, Confucius in China, creating basically a civilizational OS that China still basically runs on to this day. It just so happens that communism maps really well, and the CCP, in the way that they act, really maps well to Confucianism, right? And then you have people like Plato, which, idealize the idea of a state, right? Plato's Republic. Then you have Locke, who came up with, constitutional governance, basically, one of the main guys. And then you also have religious thinkers, right? Where you have the whole concept of Christianity, which is like basically see everyone as your brother and sister. That unlocks so much social trust because I see you as my brother that I'm willing to give you money and trust that you're going to exchange it back to me, right? I'm willing to loan you something. And it's like, this wasn't, don't get me wrong, other societies were doing these things, but they weren't doing this at the scale that Christianity unlocked, which then actually unlocked the industrial revolution, right? Where you could invest in something so long term that you aren't going to get it back the same day, right? The same year, right? The same decade, right? And the industrial revolution then scaled that even further. But I think the industrial revolution is on the scale of the agricultural revolution, right? And something else has changed logically in the human brain that we need new social technologies to be able to scale this. Because right now we're feeling the pressures of industrialization. Every nation that industrializes suffers with birth rate problems, right? And you could see it in Southeast Asia, you see it in the Western world, you see it in China, you see it in Japan, South Korea, you see it everywhere that's industrializing, right? And it could be mapping onto urban societies, because when you industrialize, you do urbanize at the same time usually. Um, because of this, you get lower birth rates, whether that be because humans don't want to live in basically a zoo, right? Where you just have one small cubby, like I'm in this apartment right now, versus having land in a big field that you can grow into. Um, but then there's trade-offs with that, right? Where like my job is very light, but a farmer's job is working 16 hours a day, right? And sun up to sundown. But you get more kids, right? So the idea is that philosophers are social technologists that design these civilizational OS and these ways that people interact with each other that then, you know, create the next leap that we can take together, right? Because without, you know, the idea of property or a law, right, and following this law, right? We even remember, I'm forgetting the Mesopotamian king. Uh, he's known for, you know, the first laws, basically. I don't know why his name is slipping my mind at this moment. But, you know, at first, hunter-gatherers did not get along with the farmers because farmers thought so differently than hunter-gatherers that they couldn't even like exist in the same place. Like they had beef with each other, they hated each other, and farmers ultimately won out because they had a social technology that allowed them to scale better, right? Like hunter-gatherers could not have as much kids because they could not feed as much kids, right? You got more food and energy, right? It was an energy game from farming, right? Farmers were more docile and maybe even worse worse fighters, according to some historians, right? But due to their civilizational glue, because they had to have so much interaction with large scale people, because farming is much more complex than hunter gathering, they were able to plan warfare better, right? They were able to have more soldiers, right? They were able to afford to feed more soldiers, which then just forced hunter gatherers out of their, you know, roaming grounds, right? Or they were forced to integrate in with with farmers, mostly through slavery, probably, now that you think about it. And that's kind of how it went until there was no more hunter gatherers, right? It's just farmers. I'm sure there's some small pockets of people, but our entire society probably, not just Western, but everywhere, probably descends from a lot more farmers than hunter gatherers, right? And yeah, so I think that we need more philosophers, right? Social technologists thinking, how can we innovate the way that people work together in this industrial world, right? How can we make it so that, you know, workers and bosses can get along at scale, right? How can we make it that, you know, people that want opportunity can create opportunity for themselves at scale, right? Because we live in such a interconnected world now that you can't just hide things from someone, right? Before you could just be like, oh, yeah, you have no idea what the king has going on. Now we're seeing people that have king's levels of wealth on social media showing their lives every single day. And that might breed animosity between people, right? And it's even said that Christianity did a really good job at handling class warfare, in a sense of like making you feel like there was something bigger than the wealth that we have material here on earth, right? So that you don't feel jealous that someone has more money than you, right? But now that we live in such a much more material world where we stop thinking about the unseen as much, we get extremely upset if someone has even more than we do, right? Instead of looking at, okay, maybe there's more to life than just money, right? But then demonizing anyone that has more money than me, right? It's like you have trouble seeing right through those things. But yeah, this is my call to anyone in the comment section. To me, the comment section is sacred and it demands sacrifice. And that sacrifice is knowledge. Knowledge from all of you guys out there watching this video, if it ever comes across your feed. Drop some knowledge. What do you think about this, right? There's plenty of the people in this world that all have different ideas. All of us have something that is in our brain that we've never shared before, right? Something that we've thought about. And I want to hear these things. I want to have conversations with you in the comment section. I want to talk about these things because I think together, one of us in this comment section, right? One of us out there in the world right now has an idea that can change everything. We just need to work together to find it, right? Let's get this world keeping on growing, right? Progress, and the beautiful thing, I'll close on this, right? Progress is not inherent, right? You can have times where your civilization is scaling and you have times where your civilization is dying, right? But the problem, the thing that I believe is that we have agency. We have a choice. We can choose to figure out these problems and allow ourselves to continue to scale and make this world better for our children. And if you don't have children, for other people's children, for humanity's sake, right? And just keep this thing going, right? So yeah, hit the comment section, sacrifice some knowledge, have a great rest of your day. Peace out, y'all.